Nancy Garcia. Nancy went missing from Asheboro, North Carolina on May 19, 2018. She stopped at the home of her ex-boyfriend on East Balfour Avenue that day to drop off their 6-month-old baby. She then went to the ex-boyfriend's sister's home to ask if his sister could help take care of the infant. She reportedly said that her mother was sick and she had to go to Mexico to care for her. However, one post on a missing page on Facebook said she was expected back that afternoon to nurse the baby. This is a pretty big conflict, because it's obviously not like North Carolina is a border town where she could just walk across. She would have either had to drive a long way or fly back. So I'm not sure how she could be expected back that day. And it also turned out, when they contacted her mother in Mexico, that her mother wasn't ill. The Asheboro Police Department performed a welfare check at Nancy's apartment on May 23rd after a co-worker reported that she had not shown up to work after a few days. This wasn't like her. She worked at a furniture factory for the past 3 years, and she'd been very responsible. It wasn't like her not to show up for work. The only clue as to her leaving is that she did make a few phone calls after her disappearance. It included a call to an out-of-state phone number. It appears those call logs haven't been released, however. Nancy always called her mother every Saturday without fail. Her mother said the last call was normal. She appeared upbeat and happy. Then the calls stopped. She had attended a child's birthday party the day before she went missing, and everyone there said she seemed fine. Nothing appeared to be wrong. Her family is clear that she's a good mom and she wouldn't abandon her daughter. She was dedicated, and her baby was born premature and was still breastfeeding. Either way, the police have found no evidence of foul play in her disappearance, but they do say that it's puzzling. She had said nothing to any of her friends about leaving. The car she was driving was a burgundy 2001 Chevy Impala with North Carolina license plate DFD 2191. The car shown here is not her actual car, but a similar vehicle. There's no evidence that her car ever crossed the border into Mexico, and there's no evidence that she flew out of North Carolina. The car was never found in an airport, bus depot, or any other place she could have left from, much less any place at all. Nancy was born in Mexico and had 4 siblings. She had moved to North Carolina in 2011 or 2012, and she eventually became a U.S. citizen. It's highly unlikely she would leave permanently from Mexico, and especially unlikely that she would not contact her family or her child. She was living a stable life, so something is believed to have happened to her. If you have any information at all, please call the number listed. Her mother said in an interview, "I am suffering every day since Nancy went missing. I just want to know where she is. I just want answers." Nancy's daughter is 4 now, and she deserves to know what happened to her mother. Nancy was 28 when she went missing. If she's still alive today, she's 32. Christina Lynn Bastian. Christina was last seen in Apple Valley, California on November 1st, 2015. She had been planning to spend the night with a female friend, but they had a disagreement and she left her friend's home at 1:45 a.m. along with her dog. Her dog was a small tan and white Maltese named Coco. When she left, however, she left her wallet, her identification, and her glasses at her friend's home, and she desperately needed those glasses in order to see, and especially to drive. Despite this, she left in her vehicle, which was a silver 2-door Dodge Ram 1500 pickup. It was spotted the next morning near Highway 247 and Boddick Road in Johnson Valley, California. She'd only owned it for 2 weeks, and when it was found, it had fresh dents and scratches on both sides. There was a note that it appeared to have been driven over rough desert terrain. It was later discovered that Coco had been found near the intersection of Bear Valley Road and Highway 18 on November 1st, 2015. This was the same day that Christina went missing. Finder of Coco placed a photo on a local missing and found animal page on Facebook for the area. A friend of Christina's mother spotted the dog, and they were able to identify Coco conclusively. The woman was kind enough to keep caring for Coco, while her family continued to look for Christina. Christina had taken a backpack with her, and it was found on a dirt road near Bear Valley Road. They searched the surrounding area, but found nothing. It's noted that Christina quit taking her bipolar medicine a few months before she disappeared. However, she seemed to be doing pretty well, but she had stated that God had healed her. As I've mentioned before, I had worked in this field, and bipolar especially is a hard diagnosis. Because even with medication working, it sometimes stops working, and there's a lot of severe ups and downs with bipolar. This can easily weigh heavily on a person. I have so much respect for those fighting bipolar symptoms because it's not easy, although medication can literally be a lifesaver. In Christina's case, it had caused extreme weight gain. It's possible she was struggling and keeping her symptoms to herself. This is in part why I talk about mental health so much on here, and I've been open about the fact that I also have a depression diagnosis. Mental health is important, and it's not something anybody should be ashamed of, because the truth is that it can happen to any of us, and it's not anything to be embarrassed by. Christina had been doing pretty well up until this time. She'd taught freshman and sophomore English at Silverado High School, and she was working on getting her master's degree. She was also saving money to buy her own home. It's also logical that had she intended on disappearing, she would have taken her vehicle and her dog, and she wouldn't have left her eyeglasses behind. There were a few clues a few days before this happened that she may have been experiencing symptoms. She told others that someone had broken into her apartment a few days earlier and that she was scared to remain at home. This was why she was at her friend's house that night. She had removed most of her belongings from the house that meant the most to her. She did this because she said if someone broke in, she didn't want them to have it. Those items were left at her friend's house. It doesn't appear that there's any evidence indicating there actually was a break-in, but it's not impossible. There were other signs of paranoia that is often present with a number of different mental illnesses, such as she had taken the SIM card out of her phone because she believed people were tracking her. The day before she disappeared, she'd taken a 700-mile round trip to Phoenix, Arizona, and back in order to get away from those she feared were after her, telling her brother-in-law that she didn't want to be Christina Bastian anymore, saying she wanted to disappear. So it's not impossible she chose to flee her life, and her family described her as having mounting student loan debt. Her family doesn't know what to believe. They feel she may have tried to walk away, and while it wasn't typical for her, her mental illness might have affected her choice. They said she's a devout Christian who enjoys writing fictional stories. They believe it's unlikely she took her own life. If she left on foot, it's possible she may have perished and wasn't found, but it's possible she's out there somewhere. If anyone has any idea where she might be, please call the number shown. She's 5'6", has red hair. She was 34 when she went missing, and she would be 40 years old today. This tattoo is located on her left foot. Christina Lynn Bastian went missing from Apple Valley, California, 6 years ago. Hannah Emily Upp. Hannah was last seen in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands on September 14, 2017. She had survived Hurricane Irma, which had struck the island the week before, so it was surprising when she disappeared shortly after. But Hannah has disappeared before. Hannah had been living in New York City and had a job as a teacher when she went missing the first time. She went missing on the first day of school and wasn't found for around 20 days. In this instance, people were taking the Staten Island ferry, and they frantically alerted others that they saw a woman floating face down in the water about a mile off the southern tip of Manhattan. They were thankfully able to rescue her, and she was treated for hypothermia, sunburn, and dehydration. After this, she was transferred to a psychiatric unit. She told the authorities it felt like only 10 minutes had passed before she became herself again, but in truth, it took 20 days. She knew her name when she was found, but she had no idea how long she had been gone or what had happened in the meantime. The investigation finally uncovered she had been roaming around New York City. Testing found nothing wrong with her physically, and eventually a diagnosis of dissociative fugue, which is a rare type of amnesia. This diagnosis is usually caused by some sort of psychological trauma. However, Hannah couldn't remember any trauma at all, so it was puzzling. It's certainly possible, however, that something happened to Hannah that she doesn't remember. One of the weirdest factors in this case, too, is that during the New York City episode, she was caught on a surveillance camera entering a gym to shower and checking her email in an Apple store. She was even seen chatting with a classmate of hers. Yet when her mother saw footage, she could tell by Hannah's demeanor that something wasn't right. Hannah eventually moved in 2012 from New York City to Maryland, taking a job at a Montessori school located there. She was a Spanish teacher, and again, on the first day of school, she disappeared. She was found 2 days later in a creek, about 1.5 miles from school. Despite this, she was allowed to return to work, and she seemed to be doing pretty well. The following year, she decided to move to St. Thomas, taking a job in the U.S. Virgin Islands at another Montessori school. No more disappearances happened, and school went on from year to year. It was 4 years later that it was discovered she left her sundress, sandals, car, and car keys at a small bar in Sapphire Beach. She usually snorkeled in this area. Hannah was a physically fit swimmer. She frequently went snorkeling. Her loved ones hope she's still alive, and they believe it's possible. They think she may have simply got on one of the many evacuation boats that were in the island due to the hurricanes and traveled to Florida, the Bahamas, St. Croix, or possibly Puerto Rico. Because of her history of dissociative events, it's possible she has no memory of who she is. She has 3 tattoos, 2 of which are shown here. A triangle with a wave on the inside of her right ankle, a sunflower on her right thigh, and a Venus symbol with an extra line on the left side of her lower torso. There is currently a GoFundMe fundraiser being put on by her mother to help fund a private investigator. If you recognize her, please call the number provided. Christina Lynn Bastian has been missing for 5 years. Shelley Lynn Jones Mook. Shelly achieved her dream of becoming a school teacher. She grew up in Pennsylvania and had been living in Tennessee since her marriage to Tyler Mook, a marriage that had since fallen apart. The 24-year-old mother was teaching reading and language at Harris Middle School in Shelbyville, Tennessee, and she was thriving there. Shelly and Tyler Mook were high school sweethearts, and at one point they were seen as the perfect couple. The high school sweethearts married as soon as they graduated from high school, having a wedding in Hawaii. Things were pretty great until she got pregnant. And then Tyler turned into a different person. He became more and more abusive, and when things were bad, her friends said they were pretty bad. The couple had been married for 6 years. Shelly had had enough of the abuse, and she divorced Tyler. But for his part, he had trouble letting her go. Tyler left her this message after the first day of teaching. Shelly, my love, congratulations on your first day of teaching. My love for you grows like wildfire. I'm polishing myself for you. He also goes on to tell her he's going to take her on a Caribbean cruise. Later writing, I love you with all of my heart, and I don't want anybody else but you. Shelly, however, wasn't interested in any of this, and the cruise never happened. They would both move on and meet and date other people. They seemed to both be doing better, and they were sharing custody of their daughter. On that last day, Shelly was to be moving to a new place to live. She was supposed to drop off her daughter at Tyler's house after school, and then travel to meet a maintenance man at her new apartment in Murfreesboro at 4:30 p.m. that Monday afternoon. But she never arrived. She had taken a few days off from work to move, so nobody missed her right away. She was set to move into an apartment about a half hour away. She'd even set up a substitute to cover her class. She was excited to be starting a new life in a new home. She was set to return to school that following Wednesday, but she never arrived, and that wasn't like her. Her school confirmed that she left around 3:30 p.m. that Monday afternoon, February 28, 2011. She went straight to her ex-husband's home to drop off their daughter, who was supposed to spend the night with her dad. This was the plan while Shelly moved. The police were able to confirm that Shelly did arrive at Tyler's house with their daughter Lily in a car seat. But for some reason, Shelly was upset with Tyler. Tyler and Shelly exchanged words, and Shelly went inside. The administration and fellow teachers at her school were very concerned, although it was eventually Tyler Mook who reported her missing when she failed to pick up their daughter at what he said was the arranged time. The police did ask the public to be on the lookout for a white, four-door, 2004 Pontiac Grand Prix. Her best friend, Brittany, would later comment that the police initially believed Shelly left on her own. They didn't take her family very seriously, and they didn't look very hard. That changed, however, when her car was found on fire. The police believed it was set on fire to hide evidence. The arson was set in a particular way. They also believed the idea was to destroy being able to identify it as Shelly's car. However, despite this, they were able to confirm it was her car. They did their best, but they weren't able to get fingerprints or any other evidence. It did make the police search harder for Shelly. It was obvious that something was wrong. Months passed, and the police didn't expect to find Shelly alive. In that time, they drugged ponds in the area and searched behind her ex-husband's home with cadaver dogs. It didn't help that her ex, Tyler Mook, was known to be abusive. When it became clear she was missing and everyone was looking for Shelly, Tyler made it clear he had zero desire to help. He was, in fact, adamant that he would not be cooperating. This was pretty shocking to those around him, and it served as a huge red flag to the authorities. Because of this, Tyler quickly became the person of interest. Not just because he'd been abusive to her in the past, but because he was the last known person to see her alive. And most importantly, his attitude about her being missing was really alarming. In fact, the TBI went so far as to publicly name Tyler Mook as the main person of interest in her disappearance. Tyler refused to be helpful in any way, only inspiring the police to investigate him and his home. However, for some reason, the police didn't interview him more than in passing. Her family was upset, so they decided that to protect Lily and get answers at the same time, they were going to take him to court. They wanted a judge to give them full custody of Lily and also do what the police hadn't and question Tyler. Tyler pled the fifth to questions including, what did you tell Lily about her mother's disappearance? On February 28th, did Shelly come to your residence with Lily? In fact, during his deposition, he asserted the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination more than 140 times, which is extremely abnormal in a situation where a parent is being honest. However, he was asked the question, did you have sex with Shelly on February 28th? Suddenly, he found the ability to answer, and to this, he said yes.
On advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer on the grounds of the Fifth Amendment.
On February 28th, did Shelly come to your residence with Lily?
On advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer on the grounds of the Fifth Amendment.
Did you have sex with Shelly on February 28th?
Yes.
What time?
On advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer on the grounds of the Fifth Amendment.
According to the transcript from one hearing in the custody case, Tyler Mook claimed that Shelly came over that afternoon and she chose to stand up her plans to move to her new house and instead she chose to hang out with her ex-husband and talk about the problems she was having in her life, saying that her boyfriend had cheated on her, and that then they made love. She then left to do some errands, saying she'd be back by 10 p.m. for Lily, but never returned. Their 6-year-old daughter, Liliana, however, spoke to a child psychologist, and she told the psychologist that her mom went into the house to talk to her dad and left her in the car seat. The 6-year-old girl said that her mother looked really upset. She said that her dad came back out to get her out of the booster seat, but she never saw her mother after that. She told them that her dad took her to her room, shut the door, and ordered her to stay inside, saying that her mother always tells her goodbye, but on this day, her mother didn't say goodbye or anything. During the hearing, more disturbing things came to light. This included multiple people coming forward to speak about Tyler using illegal drugs and selling drugs, as well as verbal and physical abuse that Tyler had directed at Shelly in the past. He frequently used emotional manipulations, like telling Shelly she was ugly, that no one would ever want her. This was witnessed by Shelly's friend, who also witnessed him viciously grabbing her wrists and throwing her against a wall. Her friend said under oath that not only she, but all of Shelly's friends were concerned for her safety. Normally, the biological father would be given custody of a child when the other parent is missing. But the allegations in this case were concerning enough that Shelly's mother was given custody of Lily. Tyler eventually moved from Tennessee to Florida, but an accidental 911 pocket dial on the part of Tyler changed everything. He accidentally butt-dialed 911, and as a result, they actually recorded a conversation that was happening. It appears Tyler was in a garage with power tools speaking to a family member, believed to possibly be his father. They were actually speaking about Shelly and the custody of Lily. Tyler said, "You can't take somebody's kid away from them for the next 13 years, for something that I've never been charged with or something that somebody said." The other person with him said, "They've already got a bunch of people lined up. They already got people seeing me leave that night. They've seen Shelly's car going down the road that night. Someone's seen me walking down the road in the middle of the night." It was a 20-minute dialogue, much of it focused on concerns about the car. He appeared to be worried there might be some sort of evidence linking him to Shelly's vehicle, which was found burning around 12:30 a.m. the night she went missing, saying, "They know I'm not going anywhere right now because I don't have Lily." The other voice responding, "They can't prove nothing." Tyler Mook realized he must have accidentally dialed 911. After he cut off the call, he called them back, saying, "Yes, I was curious if my phone dialed 911. I looked down and it said it was on an emergency call for the last 20 minutes. 911 replied, "Okay, yes. We received a call from your phone." He went on to ask about the call and what would happen to that recording. The operator would later state that much of the call was drowned out due to machine noises in the background. However, it was the call to 911 that caused them to ping the number, tying them back to Tyler Mook's phone, and made them suspicious at how desperate Tyler was to find out what would happen to that call. By now, the police were convinced Tyler was involved in Shelly's disappearance, and that he likely knew where her body was. But there wasn't anything that could be done to prove it, and the time would wind on again. 3 years after Shelly disappeared, Tyler was finally arrested, but it had nothing to do with Shelly. Tyler had a new girlfriend in Florida, and during a fight, he threw her in the water in Palm City, Florida. He then jumped in the water after her and began holding her underneath. The only reason the girlfriend survived is that a third person jumped in and saved the woman. After the accident, Tyler told a witness, "No one disrespects me in front of my family. I will kill her." He was convicted of attempted first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Shelly's daughter would continue to live with her grandmother, and not only Tyler, but his family was barred from contacting her or having visits. The young daughter, now 9, testified that her father and grandfather talked to her about wanting to burn down the home of Shelley Mook's mother. I was unable to confirm if Tyler is still in prison, I was able to locate 2 Mooks in the Florida prison, but neither of which were Tyler. Tyler was sentenced to 12 years, it appears, in 2016. He then petitioned the court to overturn the conviction based on ineffective counsel. He was apparently offered a 5-year plea deal, but his counsel at the time advised him not to take it, saying he wouldn't be found guilty of anything more than a misdemeanor, which of course was not the case. Shelly's family suffers every day that her body isn't found. Lily is now 14 and needs to know what happened to her mom. If you have any information on this case, please contact the number on your screen. Shelley Mook has been missing for 11 years. The Virginia cases. Number 1. Rachel Nicole Goode. Rachel Goode disappeared in October of 2003. She was just 20 years old at the time and 10 weeks pregnant. She had 3 children already, but the young woman looked forward to what life could bring her. The last time anyone saw her, she was hanging out with some of her friends in the parking lot behind the Elkton Volunteer Fire Department. This was in Elkton, Virginia, at approximately 6 p.m. on October 18, 2003. Rachel's friends watched her get into her Dodge Neon and drive away like anyone normally would. There was no sign of distress and no hint of what was to come. Her car was found at her home on the 100 block of Virginia Avenue in Elkton, but Rachel was gone. Rachel's parents were alarmed, and they reported her missing that same day. The responding officer who would work her case was Adam Williams, or at least everyone believed he was investigating her missing person case. That is, until 4 days later, when Rachel's parents discovered letters written between Officer Williams and Rachel. This is when her parents discovered that Rachel had a secret. She'd been having an affair with Williams, who was married. She was also carrying his baby. Once the truth came out, the Elkton police put Williams on paid administrative leave. And with this, he resigned from the police force in January of 2004, and he quickly moved out of state. This case, however, was not so easy. Rachel's body has never been found, and without a body, charges were never filed. Her parents filed a $50,000 wrongful death suit against the police, the town of Elkton, and Adam Williams. It's unclear when these cases were filed, but in 2014, a judge dismissed the case against the police and the town. This left Adam Williams alone as the sole defendant. Williams then filed suit to have it dismissed on the grounds that it was past the statute of limitations. In 2018, a judge ruled against Williams in the plea for dismissal. However, if the case has been heard, I can't find any publicity about it. To put this whole case into perspective, my daughter was born the same year that Rachel went missing, in 2003. When Williams resigned, my child was a toddler. My daughter was then 13 when Williams was finally brought into court as part of a wrongful death suit. She was 15 when he lost his plea for dismissal. Now it appears nothing's been done, and my child's 19 now. I can't imagine how excruciating that has to be for her parents. They're not even able to bury their child. There's children that have no idea what happened to their mother. Her father gave an interview saying that Rachel had a rough childhood. Her parents divorced, and she used to call her dad to report mistreatment by her stepfather in the form of taking all of her things to punish her, even taking her bed and forcing her to sleep on the floor. She would also complain that there wasn't food in the refrigerator, but he was a truck driver and he was unable to care for her full time. She reportedly fell into the wrong crowd. There wasn't a lot of parental supervision. And by the end, she had 3 children, but seemed to be turning her life around. Her father agreed to lend her $100 shortly before she went missing, with one stipulation, that she attend church on Sunday. She seemed to be doing better, and her last conversation with her father was when she told him that she was dating a police officer. But she didn't give his name. She showed him a voicemail, and that voicemail was later heard and proven to be Officer Williams. Those who knew her said that Officer Williams was the baby's father. They also said that he was married. They'd been together 3 or 4 months, and she was pregnant. There was one big complication, though. It's not clear what he did in those 4 days. Whether or not he was using that time to cover his tracks is unknown. He certainly didn't tell the truth that he knew the victim. Adam Williams chose not to tell his supervisors that Rachel was his secret girlfriend. A report did come in to say that she had been buried in a well on land near Lake Arrowhead, but the police have chosen not to dig up the well because they say the price tag would be about $12,000. There's no public indication of who owns the house where the well is located, but they do note that it was completely renovated at the time. It appears that Adam's wife had no idea about the affair. Rachel's father surmised that perhaps Rachel had threatened to expose it, perhaps because of her pregnancy. They believed that no matter what it was that was said, that he involved his father. That said, it's just a theory without evidence. But there is a reason why he feels this way. He explained that he called Adam Williams' father and instead reached his mother in Florida, speaking to her on the phone. It was then he learned that Adam's father would make an annual trip to Virginia in April or May of every year. But in 2003, he made the trip in October, at the same time that Rachel disappeared. It is important to note that neither Adam or his father have been charged. There were multiple attempts at civil lawsuits before the last one was allowed to finally stand. Rachel left behind her parents and a brother, as well as 3 children that deserve answers. Children that are adults now. By her remains not being found, it kept her killer or killers from paying for what they did. Rachel was declared dead in 2010. If anyone has any information at all on this case, or regarding where she may be, who took her life, or even what was going on in her life at that time, please call the number on your screen. Her family deserves to know what happened. While her family is working in civil court right now, it's their only option to hold Adam Williams responsible. Her father told the Washington Post, "All I want is to know where she's at. That's all I want so I can bring her home." He said this in an interview that ended up not being published, but instead going to Crist Slater's blog. The link to that blog can be found below. It appears the civil case is still pending against Williams. Rachel has been missing for 19 years. Had she lived, she would be 38 today. Her unborn child would be 18. Number 2. Rebecca Ann Crist, Staunton, Virginia. She preferred to be called by her middle name of Ann. It was a typical day in 1988, and Ann was hanging out with her sister in her apartment when a phone call came in. Ann was 25 and the mother of a young son. She asked her sister if she'd mind watching her toddler-age son, and the last time anyone saw her, she was seen walking away from her West Beverly Street apartment shortly after lunch. The 25-year-old mother never returned, and that was not normal at all. Ann was a great mom who seemed happy. She wasn't involved in drugs. There was no evidence of foul play, and her family insists she would not leave her son willingly. She stood around 5 feet tall, had red hair, and she weighed around 115 pounds. That same night, at midnight, her mother was in Ann's apartment watching her grandson and worrying about where Ann could be. The phone rang at midnight, and her mom frantically answered, but there was no voice at the other end. Her family and friends all willingly submitted to interviews, and they did what they could to cooperate. But those interviews didn't unearth any clues as to what might have happened. The police believe she left of her own accord, even though she had prepaid her rent a month ahead of time, just the day before. Her phone records were never requested by the police. It appears they might have tried to get them a year later when she was still missing, but by then it was too late. Her disappearance happened one day before she was to attend a hearing for the paternity of her son. It's also believed she was 3 months pregnant at the time she went missing, but this is not confirmed as a solid fact. In 1991, a letter arrived addressed to her family. Located in Staunton, Virginia, confessed to killing her by accident, saying he disposed of her body in a local landfill. The authorities took it seriously, but they couldn't verify any part of his story, and he's currently incarcerated for another crime. Police also note that a neighbor of Anne's went missing just a few months before she did. He was a retired postal worker, and his body was eventually recovered from the basement of his home. It turned out he'd been shot by his son-in-law, who is now in prison for that crime. A cadaver dog was used in that case, and he hit upon a spot at the end of the paved driveway, and this led the police to believe there was another body in that spot. His son-in-law, Robert Asbury, was ultimately sentenced to 45 years in prison. The area had been paved several years before Anne went missing, so it's doubtful the hit upon that spot has anything to do with her. They also offered the son-in-law of Raymond a deal. If he confessed to Rebecca's murder, he would receive no additional prison time. They just wanted the truth. He declined to confess and maintained that he was innocent. The police were inclined to believe him. Anne Crist's parents have since passed away in the years that followed. Her sisters and her son are still alive, and they desperately want to know what happened to Anne. After the 25th anniversary of her disappearance, her sisters pushed for more information, passing out flyers and looking for new leads. It unfortunately didn't help uncover anything new. So if you have any information at all, please call the number on your screen. Rebecca Ann Crist was 25 when she went missing. She's been missing for 34 years and would be 59 if still alive today. Number 3, Keith Whitmore, from Greenville, Virginia. Keith was an incredibly hard worker who worked as a maintenance mechanic at the Hershey plant in Virginia. He managed to retire early thanks to his savings, and he did this a few years before he turned 50. So it was a pretty big accomplishment. Sadly, he didn't get to enjoy it. Not for very long anyway. While working, he was described as someone who worked hard but kept to himself, although he was always willing to lend a helping hand to others who needed it. Something started to change with Keith, however. As the years wound on, he began to distance himself from his family. He purchased a house that was outside Greenville, but it was in a pretty secluded area. And from there on out, he pretty much tried to avoid people. His main interaction was simply going into town to pick up Chinese takeout once a week. His family hasn't seen Keith since July of 2015. That last interaction was when Keith went to visit his father on his deathbed. This was the last time his sister Kim saw him. He came to pay his respects and bid his father goodbye. His family said he was the old reasonable Keith. He didn't seem any different, and the family enjoyed their get-together. But then Kim began trying to reach Keith. She called, but there was no answer. She sent messages on social media, and he answered some at first, but they trickled down into nothing. She resorted to sending letters, but only silence. Now we know he was alive in this time and that he was still living in his house, despite the fact that he stopped contacting his family. Kim decided she wanted to see her brother in the spring of 2018, and that was it. She was going to do it. She stopped by her brother's house with her grandsons. She had an ulterior motive too. She'd hoped that Keith could be a good male Christian role model for her boys. But Keith wasn't there. She kept stopping by, and his cars were always in the driveway, and the porch light was on. She eventually called in a wellness check, and the police did attempt to contact him in May of 2018. But the only note refers to them saying he didn't answer the door. If anyone is wondering about welfare checks and the fact the police just knocked, I can explain a little bit from my own experience. I have called in dozens of welfare checks from a social service job that I used to have. I never had cops break into the door like you see on TV. We did many times get a landlord to let the police in, and then they would come out and tell me the result. Quite often, there was actually somebody inside. They were choosing not to answer the door. I can't recall ever having a client I needed to call on that owned their own home, so I can't really say what the process would be with that, but far more than once we weren't able to reach a landlord and nothing happened. It just resulted in the police making a note that they tried to get someone to come to the door, and that they either wouldn't or couldn't. At least here, they couldn't break in unless they had cause. His family kept checking on him, and in June, the porch light went off. It turned out the reason was that the power had been cut for non-payment. It turns out the mortgage, however, hadn't been paid in months. So while Keith was missing from his family for about 7 years, it's pretty clear it was 2018 when he actually disappeared. Especially since an acquaintance that knew him by sight saw Keith in 2018. Left behind were Keith Whitmore's vehicles, his clothing, and what appeared to be all of his belongings. The only thing missing was his wallet and his cell phone. The police and his family think it was possible he fully expected to return. His sister stated that when hunting season approaches each fall in the mountains of Virginia, she hopes that a hunter or hiker will come across a clue, believing that that's where he is, and that it will finally lead to answers about her brother's disappearance. She asked that if anyone finding a backpack or a hat, report back to the police. Keith Whitmore always wore a hat, mainly his University of Virginia hat, which says UVA on the front. The only problem I can see with this theory is that all of his vehicles were there. If he went hunting, how is that possible? But there could be more known that has not been released. Keith Whitmore has been missing for 5 years. Number 4. Robert Ray Fitzgerald, missing from Staunton, Virginia since November 12, 2012. Robert Fitzgerald went by the name Bobby, and he was 60 and very physically fit. He was a man who enjoyed hiking, and he's been missing since November of 2012. He was last seen hiking in the area of the Confederate Breastworks Trail on Shenandoah Mountain. On November 12, 2012, Bobby had visited his elderly mother, who was in her 90s at the time. He then stopped at a local convenience store. It's believed that after he left the store, he headed up Shenandoah Mountain, which is part of Staunton. The mountain itself borders Augusta County and Highland County. The day prior, he'd also hiked up that mountain, but with a female friend. It was reported that he'd accidentally lost a shirt and a cell phone. The working belief is that he went back up there to search for his missing items. He had no idea, but it turns out that another hiker had already found his missing phone. The Augusta County Sheriff's Office has video footage of Bobby and his female friend with a dog from the prior day. The video came from a vehicle-mounted camera that was filming on Shenandoah Mountain at the time, but there was no such filming the next day. Bobby wasn't reported missing until days later when he failed to show up for work on November 15, 2012. It was a job he'd worked for 30 years, and it wasn't like him not to show up. It was this that clued in the authorities something was wrong. Authorities arranged for a search of the area, quickly finding his abandoned car at the Confederate Breastworks parking lot. Shortly after the search was first initiated, inside his 2001 Kia, they discovered his trail pack, which contained power bars, bottles of water, a flashlight, and a rain poncho. For 5 days, searchers climbed over 50 miles of trails. Because he was so fit, it was believed he could possibly last longer. They covered 4,500 acres by the end, with around 200 people searching. This included canine dogs. While they have video proof he was on the mountain the day before, there was nothing on the next day to prove he'd returned, other than his vehicle. The canines didn't even hit upon a scent. A man named Lowell Sheets is a local businessman, and according to the report, he helps the police solve local crimes. It was he who spoke to a reporter along with Bobby's best friend. It was Mr. Sheets who mentioned suicide, saying it was because Bobby's home was a mess and they found old food inside of his stove. He says that this indicates he may have been depressed. I'd love to know what other people think because, to me, it's a big leap. He went on to say that his car was a mess too, and that was further proof. He commented that Bobby lived on the periphery within his social group, going to functions but saying he didn't immerse himself socially with others. This too, to me anyway, seems like a tenuous link to depression. Sheets also suggested that Bobby wouldn't have gone back to the mountain for his phone because it was a flip phone, saying, it wasn't worth anything. The prevailing theory by the police appears to be that he died of hypothermia on the mountain after possibly being injured, perhaps in a fall. Another is that Bobby was accidentally killed by a hunter during black powder season. I think this theory also belonged to Sheets. It seems like a lot of theories were being thrown about without any kind of proof. He also suggested Bobby may have been killed as part of a gang initiation, or maybe he came across a crime and was silenced. I suppose anything is possible, but I would love to know what people think about this, about throwing out theories like this. I try to report multiple theories if I can, but these seem really random. His friend told a reporter, there's a certain part of logic that says he's not on the mountain. And if he's not on the mountain, where is he? Asked if foul play has been ruled out, the Augusta County Sheriff said, we haven't ruled either way. Currently, he is just gone. I have mentioned before in other videos, but it's a good reminder to watch for remains if you're out hiking, especially if you are off trail. It's easy to dismiss bones as belonging to animals. That's not always the case. And there are a lot of people that are missing. In fact, every year, many people like Bobby go missing in state parks or on various mountains. If you find something, if you don't know it's human or not, please take it to the authorities just in case. I know there's a certain instinct to not bother people or say or do something that might be considered silly, but this is actually very important. Bobby's mother died in 2015 without ever finding out what happened to him. Bobby Fitzgerald was 60 years old when he went missing, and he's presumed deceased. He has been missing for 10 years. Melissa Brown, 15, was living in the Windsor Garden Caravan Park in Adelaide, Australia, with her mother, Rosemary Brown, who was 33 years old. Caravan parks are unusual here in the United States, but in Australia, it's something that's frequently seen. It appears that what they call caravans are essentially what we would call fifth wheels or travel trailers, and there some people live in them full-time. Something here you usually just see retired people doing. We have a lot of people from Australia that subscribe, and so one of them might be able to elaborate further. Melissa Brown was also known as Melissa Trussell. She lived with her mother and her brother in the park, but they were evicted on May 3, 2000, due to unpaid rent. Adding to the desire to eject them from the park was also the fact that they had a lot of complaints about their friends or acquaintances that were loitering around the area. They were able to locate a new home for their caravan, following the lead of a friend named Mark Nichols, to a park he was already living in. That didn't go well, however, and it was only 3 days later the mother and her 2 kids were evicted from that park, along with Mark Nichols. The 4 then slept at the Garden Island boat ramp near Mr. Nichols' caravan. Luckily for the young mother, she was able to secure a new place to park her caravan at the invitation of a friend. Mark Nichols was the last person to see Rosemary and the daughter, Melissa, at about 1:30 a.m. on Saturday, May 13, 2000. The 2 women set out on foot, apparently to try to locate Rosemary's other child, Nathan, who was 11 years old at the time. Rosemary's purse was discovered the same day, later on Stirling Street in Northfield. For some reason, however, it wasn't given to the police for another 10 days, following a plea in local media for leads. Unfortunately, Rosemary's body was found on July 2, 2000, in the mangroves at Garden Island, 7 weeks after the pair went missing. However, Melissa has never been found. They suspect that she is no longer alive, but we all know there have been exceptions over the years where young men or women were taken and held captive. It's not impossible that Melissa may still be alive, however unlikely. The police believe it's possible she was dumped into the water with her mother, but the divers were unable to find her. Nathan Davidson has spoken out over the years about his desperation to know what happened to his sister. He said he knows his mother is gone, but he can remember clearly the last time he saw her, what she looked like, but not that last conversation that they had. That has faded from his memory. Nathan grew up being housed by multiple relatives until he was old enough to be on his own. He eventually became a house painter and is now a father to 2 daughters himself. Nathan explained that he was at a friend's house that night that his mother and sister went missing. He described his mother as looking tense and unhappy at the time. But of course, at the time they were homeless and moving around quite a bit, he said. The 2 kids were attending school at Windsor Gardens, and after school they helped their mom with her cleaning and landscaping jobs. At the time, their mother was always working nonstop at 3 jobs, trying hard to make ends meet. Part of him will always be that 11-year-old boy needing to know what happened to his 15-year-old half-sister, saying he has to know if Mel is still around, if she somehow survived. Numerous people have been questioned at length over the disappearance and murder of the 2, but there's no firm suspect. There was little to no forensic evidence of use. Her cause of death has been withheld. The case is currently waiting for leads. If anyone has any information at all, please call Crime Stoppers at the number given. A reward of $200,000 was made available for information about the murder of Rosemary Brown, as well as a $1 million reward for information on Melissa and the recovery of her body. Sarah MacDiarmid. Sarah was just 23 years old when she was last seen in Melbourne, Australia, on July 11, 1990. She was at the Conanook train station located in Victoria. She had been playing tennis with her friends that day. When the train arrived, it was 20 minutes off schedule, later than expected. She was seen on surveillance video leaving the train station at 10:20 p.m. that night. It's believed that she was hurrying, as she was late and she had to work the next morning. She was spotted leaving the train station, walking in the direction of a parking lot that wasn't well lit. It was the place she had parked her red 1978 Honda that morning. Even though it was a weekday, later in the evening, people were still wandering around. Many remembered seeing the blonde-haired young woman holding a tennis racket. She was seen crossing the footbridge. One witness heard someone shout, "Give me back my keys," although it's impossible to know if that was Sarah yelling. No one knows for sure if she made it to her car from the footbridge, but it's likely, as there were blood stains on the car and on the ground by the car. She hasn't been heard from since. More than 250 police conducted an extensive air, sea, and land search for 21 days, desperately trying to find the young woman, but no further clues to what happened were found. Her parents, over the years, have made many public pleas for information. Detectives named what they referred to as a violent prostitute, known as Jody Jones, as the prime suspect. She is described as being part of a group of homeless, violent drug addicts who prey opportunistically on people around them. They did arrest Jody 12 days later, but it appears there was a lack of evidence in order to prove it was her. They did say they believe Sarah was robbed and attacked by the sex worker, as well as 3 others. Despite this, however, over the years, other suspects have been suggested. The truth is, more information is desperately needed. Australia seems to offer impressive rewards in many of their cases, and this one is no different. There is a $1 million reward in this case. If you have any information, please call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000, or you can submit a confidential crime report online. Sarah MacDiarmid has been missing for 32 years. Sherrlynn Mitchell. Cherylyn Mitchell was 16 when she was last seen on November 22, 1973, leaving her home on Eyre Street in Ballarat, Victoria. She was supposed to meet some friends at a bus stop, but when her friends arrived, she wasn't there. She worked nearby, but she didn't return to work or pick up her last paycheck. Her family and friends searched everywhere, but there were zero clues as to what happened to Sherrlynn. The Facebook group dedicated to finding Sherrlynn had an interesting message back in 2013, saying that a DM was sent to one of Sherrlynn's friends, and that woman happened to notice one of that woman's friends on Facebook looked a lot like the missing Sherrlynn. So she messaged the woman, and the odd thing is, it showed that her message was read, and then instead of replying, the friend of Sherrlynn's blocked her. Now obviously there are many reasons someone might block another person, but it's an interesting side note in a story without a lot of leads. The Victoria Police released new recreations of what she might look like now if she was still alive. And her brother Gerald has stage 4 lung cancer, and he desperately wants to know what happened to his sister before he passes. Her mother Betty desperately looked for her daughter over the years, but she's since passed. This leaves her brother Gerald and one other brother as surviving relatives. Gerald said, "I don't want to pass away until I know she's all right." They were able to create a snapshot of what Sherrlynn might look like through the DNA from a lock of Sherrylynn's hair. It also led to partial matches in a database, but there's not an explanation of exactly what that means. She is described as having red hair, hazel eyes, and a fair complexion. Please contact the Victoria Police if you have any idea where she is. You can leave an anonymous message with Crime Stoppers. Sherrlynn went missing in 1973 at the age of 16. If she's still alive, she would be 65 today. Thank you everybody for watching and listening. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. Take care of yourselves and each other.